Alright guys, it's Rabea, hope you're all doing well. So this is another one of those videos that I kind of turned up to the studio. I was like, I don't really know what I'm going to do, but I've seen a few comments asking about dialing in ambient tones or reverb and delays and how I like to dial them in. I figured I would do a video on that, or at least give you some tips. First thing is, you can do this with any reverb pedal and delay pedal that have control over the tone. Whether that's high pass, low pass, tone, EQ, it's named so many different things on so many different pedals. Most of them nowadays have the ability to do that. If you've got reverb and delay pedals or access to reverb and delays that you use in your guitar tones that you can do that with, that's the first port of call for me. For this video, I'm going to be using my Victory amps, Kraken, which is my go-to, and I'm also going to be using my Music Man Sabre with my silos in to give you the kind of tone that I would normally go for playing these ambient passages and things like that using reverb and delay. Okay, first things first, when we're talking about ambient tones, for me that generally means like a low to mid gain tone, pushed clean, whatever you want to call it. So the amp is on gain 1, a crunch, not loads of gain, but this is how it would sound from the kind of thing I would go for. And if you've got a guitar with humbuckers that you can split or blend, you can get this tone out of it. So I like to use all of them depending on what it is I'm playing, but you get the idea. It's to be able to split down and get more chime out of the guitar, because that's really nicely accentuated when you add reverb and delay. Something else I might do is throw in a little bit of compression. On the bridge pickup, that's going to drive it, but on the split coils, it's just going to add a little bit more body to everything. But for now, I'll take it off so you can just hear. So, first thing we'll do is signal chain. I always run reverb and delays in the loop because I like the way they interact with the amplifiers in the effects loop. Sometimes I'll put a delay in front and that does the whole, I like to call it the shoegazer effect, where it's that cascading, really erratic sort of delay sound. It works for some things, but for me, if I'm doing the ambient pads and stuff, I prefer it to be in the loop. In this video, I'm using the Strymon El Capistan and the Flint. I chose these two because they're small and they're fairly simple controls, so it's easier for me to express the points I'm trying to make. So let's start with the delay. At the minute, I've put the tape age. This is a tape delay. Most digital delays, tape delays, analog delays have control of the tone, so you can, of course, dial it back, but this is a tape delay. And the control for EQ is tape age on this pedal, so I've dialed it all the way out. Let me boost the mix so you can hear exactly what's happening. So that's already not too bad considering it's a tape and it degrades as it goes. I'm just going to boost the repeats a little bit. And all this is important into getting an ambient tone. But first thing I'm going to do is boost the tape age or dial back the high end. That might be overkill, so I want it about here. So I've dialed the mix quite high up with the repeats quite long so that you can really hear the tones that you can create. That's something that, depending on the song and the sound, that's what I like to do. I want you to be able to hear the dissipation without it necessarily getting in the way. That's why I can turn the mix up higher with the repeats longer by pulling back the tone of the delay. If I turn up the wow and the flutter, or modulation on a lot of, you know, delay pedals and reverb pedals have modulation controls, so that kind of just creates a nice sort of bed of vibe underneath. We'll just dial that back a little bit like that. So as you can hear, we're already getting a ton of vibe just from using the delay. So I'm going to stop there with the delay, and we're going to move on to the reverb. So at the minute, I've got the colour. In the Flint's case, the colour is the kind of EQ of it. It's all the way in. One thing I would say for me with reverb is generally like a long decay. So anywhere from sort of, I want to say 4 seconds, 5 seconds onwards, as you can hear. Now there's a couple things wrong with that for me straight away. I'm going to make the decay a tiny bit longer. And you can hear that top end, it's too much for me. So I'm going to dial that back. See what it sounds like now. That's much more to my liking. Bit more mix. This doesn't necessarily work with all reverbs. Generally, I'll gravitate towards a plate or a hall. Spring reverb, it wouldn't really work. And then modulated reverbs, it does tend to work. It just depends on the quality of those high-end dissipations. If you've seen recently, I did a reverb shootout with Andertons, and yeah, I really struggled with a lot of them because they have this zingy effect. And I saw in the comments someone said, yeah, well, that is the characteristic of some reverbs in real world. And I disagree. Like, I'm talking about that digital synthetic kind of dissipation that sounds like millions of reflections happening all at once. I've never in my life heard reverb that sounds like that in the real world. So for me, that's lovely. I might boost the color a tiny bit. And you'll find as well, like if you move to a split coil tone now, so I'm into that. So let's see what happens when we combine the two. Remember, delay into reverb. So that's sounding nice and vibey for me straight away. It's worth pointing out that the delay tempo is set so that I could have done the whole like. Which is fun, but I would actually slow it down a bit. Somewhere like this. And I'll also back off the mix just a bit, because now we've got reverb in there. After the delay, it's reverberating those repeats as well. If you're running delay on its own, you'll find that you can have the mix higher, but when I put reverb after it, I usually have to back off the mix of the delay. So let's see where it's sitting now. Tiny bit more tape age. Do you know what? going to boost it up a little bit more. At this point, I'm going to throw on a compressor using a split coil tone, and that's where I'll get that warm sort of bed of just tone. So that's pretty much there for me now. The reason that I throw the compressor on is because it allows you to play really softly, but it's keeping that level up, so when you start picking with your fingers, so that's really nice. That's basically my go-to ambient tone. I'll find that tone more or less with any reverb and delay pedal I can that's got at least control over the tone, so to speak. Compressor isn't 100% necessary, but if you've got it, it's really nice to have that as well. It allows you to play softer with your fingers and it keeps everything nice and bold. I guess it's not just the sound, it's also what you play, because if you start playing like power chords and strumming loads, it's not going to work. It's about being spacious. It's about allowing the reverb and the delay to dissipate and breathe. And a lot of the times I'll do stuff like I'll start picking soft and then pick harder so that those reverb and delay kind of accentuate that kind of mood and effect and dynamic. So like, it's also worth pointing out that if you're running, like if you're playing on a drone, or in other words, you keep that root note going and you just play around modally, that's where a lot of the reverb sounds, that's where a lot of the ambient play style for me comes from, just having those. So that's one useful tip with regards to what to play. Keep it sparse, play dynamically, so not all the same velocity, play soft and hard. Use your fingers if you've got a compressor as well. And then in terms of like, I guess, chord voicings and chord progressions, you can really do anything you want, but generally if I'm playing in a drop tuning, I'll do the whole like root and third thing. A lot of the time my approach with it is more exploratory. I'm just like letting my fingers kind of move around the fretboard, recognizing where I could voice a chord or a shape or a run or a lick or something like that, and just kind of being as free-flowing as possible. There's never really any timing to it, unless you want to time it up with the delay and create a time-based thing. But for me, it's just about free-flowing, just let it sit, let it simmer, and let it, you know, give you the vibe, because that's what these effects are really good for. So it's really just a case of allowing yourself to listen and get lost in the immersive qualities of reverb and delay. The other good thing of having a compressor and a bit more gain is that you can start swelling. So if I boost the gain a bit and I'll swell into some chords. So that's another cool thing you can do. But again, I haven't touched the reverb and delay settings since I found them and sat in with them. And again, if I take off the compressor, I can now play, because there's high end taken away a little bit, I can play with the bridge pickup and so yeah, by backing off the tone of the delay and the reverb, it allows you to play like lead lines and stuff, and it doesn't necessarily get in the way too much. I can accentuate that a little bit by having a drive in front. Go. There's a quick video on how I dial in reverb and delay pedals to do the kind of ambient playing that I like to do and create a bed of vibe and soundscape and all the rest of it. It can be elaborated on, and as I say, all reverb and delay pedals are different, but if you've got reverb and delay pedals that allow you to manipulate the tone of them, that's the best place to start. As I said, you can add a compressor or an overdrive if you want, but I generally like to keep things fairly low gain for the most part when it comes to these kind of tones. I'll do other videos where I go into more of the intense sounds, the colossal tone sounds using fuzzes and octaves and reverb and delays in maybe another video. But for this one, I just wanted to keep it fairly basic. As I said, all reverb and delay pedals that have control over the tone, you can do this with. It doesn't have to be Strymon, it doesn't have to be Chase Bliss, it doesn't have to be any really expensive stuff. You know, some of the really good pedals that you can do that with, for example, the JHS 99 series or whatever they're called, 3 series, I can't remember the name of them, But they have a reverb and delay that allow you to do that too, that I've done really nice ambient tones with before. There's a ton of great reverb and delay pedals out there that you can use to create these kind of tones. But just remember, fairly low gain on the amp, you know, using split coil tones. If you're gonna do that, compressor really helps rather than boosting the gain. And yeah, let it sing. Let that reverb and delay do its thing. Play spaciously. Choose voicing of chords that are fairly, you know, wide, I would say, because if they're close together in terms of intervallics, can start to sound a bit muffled. So it's nice if you've got a low note and a high note and creating that harmony there. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully it's not been too long. Hopefully John's created something fairly concise. But hope you've enjoyed it. I'll put links in the description box to all this gear, of course, and if you want to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, all the rest of it, please do. It's rabeaafro. Got music in the description box. You can listen to all my different bands. Got merch at sleeplessapparel.co.uk, so please go check out all that stuff. And until next time, I've been Rabea, and I will see you all very soon.